Hello lovelies, in this video we're going to be going through our Edexcel GCSE History Paper 2, the option Early Elizabethan England that we've written for 2024. So what I want you to do is to pause after the question comes up, have a go at it yourself on a bit of paper and then play the video and look at the answer that we've written. So not only the content but the exam skills as well. How have we structured our answer to properly show off to the examiner that we know lots and lots about the topic we're talking about.
Describe two features of Walsingham's use of spies for 4 marks. The two features here are marked separately, so there are 2 marks available per feature to give you a total of 4. It is important to note that the features identified must be different. If they are deemed to be too similar, then you will not be awarded the second set of marks. To describe a feature, you first of all need to identify it and then provide some supporting detail. This supporting detail need only be a sentence or 2. The topic of this question is Walsingham's use of spies. Francis Walsingham was Elizabeth's Secretary of State from 1573, and he developed a network of spies that were used to uncover plots against Elizabeth. Features that would be relevant to this question include that Walsingham's network of spies extended across England as well as Europe, that he had a range of spies, agents provocateurs and informants. Writing up these features, our first feature might therefore read that Walsingham developed a network of spies. This network extended across all the counties and main towns of England, as well as in parts of Europe, such as France and Spain. This first feature would be awarded 2 marks, as we have a valid feature identified and then relevant supporting detail provided. A second feature might then read that Walsingham had a range of spies and informants. Some were specially trained, including agents provocateurs, but many were ordinary people who were paid to provide information. The second feature would again be awarded 2 marks, as we have a valid feature identified that is different from the first, and then relevant supporting detail is provided. This would give this answer in total 4 marks. Explain why Philip II launched the Spanish Armada in 1588. You may use the following in your answer: religion and the Treaty of Nonsuch from 1585. You must also use information of your own for 12 marks. This question requires a response that explains several different reasons, each of which is supported by precise information. As prompted by the question, it is important to note that you must go beyond the 2 stimulus points provided and include information of your own. The topic of this question is the Spanish Armada of 1588 and the reasons for its launch. So essentially we are being asked to consider, why did Philip wish to invade England? Before you start writing your response to this question, it is worth spending a couple of minutes planning your answer. This will help ensure that your answer is well organised and well focused. There are a number of reasons behind Philip's plan to invade England. Starting with our first stimulus point, we're going to consider the issue of religion. Europe in this time period was divided between Catholicism and Protestantism. Philip, as a staunch Catholic, wished to see the overthrow of the Protestant Queen Elizabeth I, who he believed to be a heretic. Prior to the launching of the Spanish Armada, Philip had been involved in numerous Catholic plots against Elizabeth and also had the support of the Pope, who had excommunicated Elizabeth in 1570. In addition, the signing of the Treaty of Joinville in 1584 allied Spain and France against Protestantism. Religion and Philip's desire to overthrow Elizabeth because of her Protestant beliefs was therefore a significant cause of the Spanish Armada. Using our second stimulus point of the Treaty of Nonsuch, another reason for the Spanish Armada was due to English involvement in the Netherlands. Here, the English had been providing support for rebels fighting against Spanish rule. With the signing of the Treaty of Nonsuch in 1585, this support became direct, with a military campaign led by the Earl of Leicester. This served to exacerbate tensions between England and Spain, but also Leicester's failure to achieve any real success might have emboldened Philip, who therefore saw England as being militarily weak and seized the opportunity to invade. Finally, moving beyond the stimulus points to include information of our own, we might consider the commercial rivalry between the two countries. Again, this contributed to the tension between England and Spain, as Philip had been angered by the actions of English privateers in attacking and robbing Spanish treasure ships and colonies. Significant in this was Francis Drake, who Elizabeth knighted in 1580, and therefore seemed to show that the Queen of England officially backed these actions against Spanish interests. We now have an answer planned that includes several reasons for why Philip launched the Spanish Armada, going beyond the two stimulus points provided. Let's now have a look at how we might write these points up to achieve a top-level response. Religion was a key reason for the launch of the Spanish Armada. Philip II desired to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I, whom he regarded as a heretic due to her Protestant beliefs. Elizabeth's excommunication by the Pope in 1570 encouraged him in this endeavour, as well as promising forgiveness for those participating in the invasion attempt. Philip's long-standing support for Catholic conspiracies against Elizabeth, such as the Ridolfi and Throckmorton plots, demonstrated his commitment to restoring Catholicism in England, a cause that was further advanced by the signing of the Treaty of Joinville in 1584, which allied Spain and France against Protestantism. Philip's religious fervour was therefore a significant factor in his decision to launch the Armada. This first paragraph demonstrates the requirements of a top-level response, as we have a valid reason identified that is then supported with precise information. The reason is also fully explained, with a clear link between the evidence and the question. Continuing with the rest of the answer, English involvement in the Spanish Netherlands was also an important reason. By signing the Treaty of Nonsuch in 1585, Elizabeth committed to supporting the Dutch rebels fighting against Spanish rule, marking a direct intervention in the Spanish effort to crush the Dutch revolt. Elizabeth's decision to back the Protestant rebels with both military and financial support angered Philip and represented a significant challenge to Spanish authority in Europe. However, the failure of the Earl of Leicester to achieve any real success in commanding Elizabeth's forces in the Netherlands may have emboldened Philip, who perceived the English to be militarily weak. Developments in the Netherlands therefore contributed significantly to religious and political tension between England and Spain, and Philip's decision to invade. A final reason was the commercial rivalry between the two countries, as the actions of Sir Francis Drake and other English privateers worsened tensions. Drake's circumnavigation of the globe in the years 1577 to 80 included raids on Spanish treasure ships and colonies in the Americas, and was seen as a direct attack on Spanish naval dominance. Furthermore, his subsequent knighting by Elizabeth in 1580 further insulted Spain, as it appeared to officially condone piracy against Spanish interests. Combined, these actions incurred substantial and humiliating financial losses for Spain. They therefore provoked a response and served as a catalyst for Philip's decision to launch the Armada. The remainder of this answer continues to demonstrate the requirements of a top-level response. Two additional reasons are identified in clearly defined paragraphs. They are then supported by precise information and well linked to the question, with the reasons fully explained. Finally, analytical language is used throughout this response that shows a solid understanding of exactly how these different reasons contributed to the decision to launch the Spanish Armada in 1588. Elizabeth's religious settlement was not seriously challenged in the years 1559 to 68. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following in your answer: the oath of supremacy and recusants. You must also use information of your own for 16 marks. This question requires a judgment to be made concerning how far you agree with the given statement. Your judgment on this might be full agreement, it might be partial agreement, or you might decide to disagree. Before you arrive at your judgment, you need to produce a balanced answer, considering reasons to both support and challenge the statement. These reasons should be fully explained and supported with precise information. Finally, at arriving in your judgment, you must show the application of valid criteria. The topic of this question is the Elizabethan religious settlement in the time frame 1559 to 68. This is therefore looking at the religious settlement in the first 9 years after it was introduced. The religious settlement was Elizabeth's attempt to reconcile Catholics and Protestants in England by incorporating elements of both into the country's religious practice. It was made up of the Act of Supremacy, the Act of Uniformity, and the Royal Injunctions. Despite Elizabeth's attempt to incorporate Catholicism and Protestantism into the settlement, it did face challenge in the years 1559 to 68. However, the focus of this question is whether or not this challenge can be deemed to be serious. In arriving at our judgment, therefore, we will need to give consideration to how we can define serious challenge. Before we start writing our response, it is worth spending a few minutes planning your answer, thinking of the evidence to both support and challenge the statement. This will help ensure that your answer is well organised, focused on the question, and has a clear judgment throughout. Evidence, first of all, to support the statement that the settlement was not seriously challenged might include the widespread conformity with it. For example, most people in England attended Church of England services, and most parish priests took the oath of supremacy. Further evidence might state that the settlement was received positively in parts of the country such as London and the South East. Finally, you might also point to the fact that very few fines were imposed in this period for recusancy, people not attending Church of England services. This might therefore suggest that the government did not consider the settlement to be seriously threatened. Evidence to challenge the statement, on the other hand, might include the strength of opposition from both Catholics and Puritans. Catholic opposition was evident from the fact that all but one of the bishops appointed in the reign of Mary I refused to take the oath of supremacy, necessitating their replacement. The Pope in 1566 issued explicit instructions to Catholics in England not to attend Church of England services, and increasingly recusancy became quite common in the north of the country, with an estimated 1/3 of the nobility and a significant proportion of the gentry refusing to conform. Puritan opposition originated from the disappointment that the religious settlement was not more Protestant in appearance. In particular, Elizabeth was challenged on the display of crucifixes in churches and the wearing of vestments by parish priests, which did necessitate some concessions from her. With our plan complete, we can now consider our criteria for judgment and how we can decide whether or not these challenges were serious. Issues to consider might therefore include how widespread the challenges were to the religious settlement, how many people in England opposed it. We might also consider the social status of those opponents. Does opposition from bishops and nobility pose more of a challenge than opposition from commoners, for example? We might also consider the impact of any challenge. Did it result in a change to the settlement, for example? Finally, we might look at the response of the government itself. What do their actions suggest about how much of a challenge they perceived any opposition to be? With our plan completed and our criteria for judgment decided upon, let's now have a look at a possible written response to this question. Whilst Elizabeth's religious settlement did face challenges in the years 1559 to 68, I do not believe these were serious. Elizabeth's religious settlement was broadly accepted across England, with most ordinary people conforming by attending Church of England services. This widespread compliance is further evidenced by the fact that most parish priests took the oath of supremacy, recognising Elizabeth as the supreme governor of the Church of England. This acknowledgement by the clergy was crucial for the successful implementation of the settlement at a local level. The settlement's positive reception in economically and politically important areas like London and the South East played a crucial role in ensuring its longevity. Moreover, the reluctance of authorities to impose fines for recusancy, except in cases of blatant non-compliance, suggests a perception that the settlement was not under serious threat. Consequently, the settlement encountered no widespread challenge in the years 1559 to 68. Pausing to consider this first part of the answer, we can see here the makings of a top-level response. The judgment on the question is asserted from the outset and then revisited at the end of the first paragraph in the form of a mini-judgment, with criteria being applied. Moreover, precise supporting information is included to show a good level of knowledge and understanding, and the points made are fully explained and linked back to the question, with the use of several examples of analytical language. Continuing with the response, on the other hand, the settlement did face opposition from Catholics that intensified as the period progressed. The refusal of all but one of the bishops appointed by the Catholic Mary I to take the oath of supremacy necessitated their replacement, highlighting the depth of opposition from church leaders. The situation was heightened in 1566 when the Pope explicitly instructed Catholics not to attend Church of England services. As a result, recusancy became an act of defiance among devout Catholics in the north of England, with an estimated 1/3 of the nobility and a significant portion of the gentry refusing to conform. Finally, the arrival of Mary Queen of Scots in England in 1568 created a real threat to Elizabeth and her settlement, as in the eyes of many Catholics she was the legitimate queen. The most significant challenge to the settlement arguably came from Puritan opposition within the Church of England. This was particularly evident in the 1560s through disputes over religious practices, such as the use of crucifixes and vestments, which Puritans associated with Catholicism. As a result, Elizabeth was forced to make concessions, notably the removal of crucifixes from churches. Thereafter, however, Puritan opposition had limited impact. In conclusion, Elizabeth's religious settlement did face challenges in the years 1559 to 68. However, these did not prove to be serious. Opposition was limited to certain groups in society as well as certain areas of the country. Further, careful handling of the opposition meant the fundamental nature of the settlement remained intact, with most people and clergy in England acting in conformance. The remainder of this answer continues to demonstrate the requirements of a top-level response. Precise supporting information is included, with a clear focus on the question and the points being fully explained. In addition, a balanced answer has been provided, with reasons to both support and challenge the statement included. The points made throughout the answer feed into the final judgment or conclusion at the end of the response, which is well justified and explained through the application of valid criteria. Here we can see that a clear judgment has been reached that the challenges to the religious settlement were not serious. This is taking into consideration how widespread the challenges were, how the government responded, and the impact of any opposition. The main reason why the attempts to colonise Virginia failed was due to the resistance of the Native Americans. How far do you agree? Explain your answer. You may use the following in your answer: Wingina and lack of farmers. You must also use information of your own for 16 marks. This question requires a judgment to be made considering how far you agree with the statement. The judgment arrived at might be full agreement, partial agreement, or even complete disagreement. In arriving at your judgment, it's important that you produce a balanced response, considering evidence to both support and challenge the statement. This will need to be done through the presentation of well-explained reasons supported by precise information. Finally, at arriving at your judgment, you will need to demonstrate the application of valid criteria. The topic of this question is the attempted colonisation of Virginia in North America that occurred during the 1580s. The focus is to consider why this attempted colonisation failed. What were the reasons for this failure, and which one would you consider to be the most significant? In formulating your response, you can use the 2 stimulus points provided, but it is important that you also include information of your own if you wish to access the higher marks available for this question. It is worth for this type of question spending a few minutes planning your response, deciding the evidence that you are going to use to both support and challenge the statement. Evidence to support the statement will focus on the resistance of the Native Americans and how this contributed to the failure of the attempts to colonise Virginia. Using the first stimulus point provided, we might refer to the actions of a local Native American chief, Wingina. Wingina was suspicious of the English settlers, and in particular grew alarmed by the number of deaths amongst his own people once they had come into contact with the English. He put this down to supernatural powers, but it was most likely caused by European diseases that Native Americans had no immunity to. The dependence of the settlers on the Native Americans for supplies frustrated Wingina, and over time tensions escalated, resulting in violent confrontations. This culminated in the spring of 1586 with a plan of attack formulated by Wingina in alliance with other local chiefs. Although the plan failed and Wingina was killed, this certainly seemed to be the final straw for the colonists, who returned to England not long after. Now to produce evidence to challenge the statement, by considering other reasons why the attempt to colonise Virginia failed. Firstly, we might consider the idea that the attempt was doomed from the start. Most notably, the ship on which the settlers sailed, the Tiger, leaked on the voyage across the Atlantic Ocean, which destroyed many of the foodstuffs that the settlers were taking with them. Food shortages were compounded by the fact that the settlers arrived in North America at the wrong time of year for planting, and many of the farming and hunting techniques that would work in England and Europe just could not be applied to North America. We might also consider the people who went as settlers to Virginia, the clashes that took place between the different groups, and the fact that there were just not enough farmers. This led to a skills shortage, as well as a shortage of raw materials, both of which made it incredibly difficult to establish a successful settlement. With our plan completed, we now need to decide upon our criteria for judgment. How are we going to decide, out of these various reasons, which was the main one for why the attempts to colonise Virginia failed? To do so, you might want to consider the interrelationship or the links between the different reasons. Did one reason only occur because of something else? Categorising the reasons into long-term, short-term, fundamental, catalyst might also help you decide which ones were the most significant. Let's now have a look at a possible written response to this question. While the failure to colonise Virginia was due in part to the resistance of Native Americans, I do not believe it to be the main cause. The colonising expedition was doomed from the start. The settlers' ship, the Tiger, sustained damage crossing the Atlantic Ocean that allowed seawater to spoil much of their essential food supplies. Moreover, they departed too late in the year, missing the crucial planting season, and they were unprepared for the hot, humid climate that accelerated food spoilage. Further, English fishing techniques proved ineffective in the shallow waters surrounding Roanoke Island, exacerbating the food shortages and leading to a reliance on Native Americans, which would become a source of tension. Considering this response so far, we can see that the judgment has been made clear from the outset. An alternative reason for the failure of the attempts to colonise Virginia has then been proposed, with the points explained and supported with precise information. Continuing now with the rest of the response. The type of people chosen as colonists created additional difficulties, as members of the upper classes refused to engage in physical labour, creating a divide with the farmers who are keen to work their own land. The lack of discipline among the soldiers and a shortage of farmers worsened the situation, leaving craftsmen without the raw materials needed for their trades. Consequently, the settlers faced a lack of resources and skills that were fundamental to successfully establishing a colony. Relations with Native Americans, in contrast, were initially established and appeared to offer the colonists a source of supplies. However, the local chief Wingina remained suspicious of the settlers and believed them to have supernatural powers that resulted in the death of many of his people. In time, the colonists' reliance on the Native Americans only served to strain relations, culminating in violent confrontations. In the spring of 1586, Wingina allied with other chiefs and planned an attack on the English settlement. Forewarned of the ambush, the settlers managed to kill Wingina, but the continued hostility proved unsustainable. Subsequently, the colonists abandoned their efforts and returned to England. In conclusion, the resistance of Native Americans proved to be a short-term cause of the failure to colonize Virginia. However, poor planning, timing, and bad luck were more significant reasons, meaning that the attempt stood very little chance of success from the outset. The remainder of this answer continues to demonstrate the requirements of a top-level response. The answer is well focused on the question, with the reasons for the failure to colonize Virginia fully explained and supported by precise information. Clear judgment is arrived at in the conclusion that is well explained and supported through the application of valid criteria.
Well done, lovelies. I'm really, really proud of all of your hard work.